At some point in history, money stopped representing reality. It stopped reflecting work, resources, or value. And quietly, without a single global announcement, it became something else. Today, numbers move markets. Screens flash green or red. Entire nations rise or fall not because of what they produce, but because of how they are managed. Here is the uncomfortable mystery. If money is supposed to measure value, why does it now control behavior? Why can governments print trillions without immediate collapse, while individuals drown in debt for far less? Why does economic growth feel disconnected from real life? And most importantly, when did money stop being real? To answer that, we have to go back. Not to modern banks or Wall Street, but to the moment money changed its purpose. For most of human history, money was brutally honest. Gold was gold, silver was silver. If you had more money, it meant you had more something real. Land, labor, or resources. Empires rose and fell based on physical limits. How much gold could be mined? How much grain could be grown? How many people could work? Money had friction. It had boundaries. It could not be created by decree. But that honesty came with a problem. It made governments weak. Wars were expensive. Empires could not endlessly expand. Rulers were limited by what they could actually collect. Power searched for a workaround. And it found one. The first major crack appeared when governments realized something revolutionary. Money did not need to be fully real, as long as people believed it was. Early banks began issuing paper claims against gold they did not fully hold. At first, this was small, controlled, almost accidental. This practice became known as fractional reserve banking. Money was no longer a thing, it became a promise. As long as not everyone demanded their gold at the same time, the illusion held. And it worked frighteningly well. Trade expanded. Economies grew. Governments noticed something powerful. Debt could finance the present by stealing from the future. By the 20th century, money had evolved from a store of value into an instrument of control. Central banks emerged not to create wealth, but to manage stability. Interest rates became levers. Inflation became policy. Debt became normal. Then came the defining moment. In 1971, the United States quietly ended the gold standard. The dollar, the backbone of the global system, was no longer tied to anything physical. For the first time in history, money floated freely, anchored only by trust. This was not presented as a revolution. It was framed as a technical adjustment. But in reality, money crossed a line. It no longer represented value. It represented policy. Once money was untethered, the rules changed completely. Governments could spend without saving, borrow without limits, inflate without immediate consequence. Debt exploded not because of emergencies, but because the system rewarded it. Here's a paradox. The more debt accumulated, the more necessary the system became. Debt created dependence. Dependence created obedience. Entire economies began revolving around credit expansion, asset inflation, and constant growth narratives. But real wages stagnated. Productivity slowed, inequality surged. Money was no longer describing the economy, it was directing it. As money lost its connection to reality, societies changed. Prices rose faster than incomes. Savings lost value quietly through inflation. Risk was socialized, rewards were privatized. Every crisis followed the same pattern. Excess debt built up, the system strained. Central banks intervened. More money was created. Each intervention fixed the symptoms and worsened the disease. By the time people noticed something was wrong, the system had already adapted. People did not ask why everything was so expensive. They asked how to survive it. That is when money fully became a management tool. Every generation tries to fix the system. Regulations are introduced. Banking reforms are promised. Oversight committees are formed. But none address the core problem. Money is no longer designed to reflect reality, only to stabilize perception. When inflation rises, it is called temporary. When bubbles form, they are called necessary. When debt grows, it is called sustainable. The language itself is managed. And because collapse is politically unacceptable, delay becomes a strategy. Look at the modern world. Global debt exceeds global production. Markets rise despite weak fundamentals. Crises arrive faster, and recoveries feel weaker. The same loop repeats again and again. Cheap money encourages risk. Risk creates bubbles. Bubbles demand intervention. Intervention creates dependency. The system survives, but reality erodes. Money does not fail suddenly. It fails quietly. Money today is not a mirror of value. It is a behavioral incentive, a political stabilizer, a psychological management system. It tells people when to spend, when to save, when to fear, and when to hope. As long as it functions, even imperfectly, it remains unquestioned. But history shows something chilling. Every system that prioritizes control over reality eventually faces a reckoning. Money did not lose reality by accident. It was redesigned to manage complexity, power, and risk. That is not a flaw of the system. It is the system. And the longer money stays detached from real value, the more fragile trust becomes. If money no longer represents reality, what happens when people finally demand that it does? That question has ended empires before. History suggests it will again. The only uncertainty is when, not if. If you want to understand how financial systems really work, not as taught, but as used, stay connected. Because the most dangerous systems are the ones we stop questioning.